This video is part of a larger series wherein I will be watching and discussing every Studio Ghibli movie chronologically. And today I watched Mimi wo Sumaseba, or Whisper of the Heart. And spoiler warning. Country roads take me home to the place I belong. Anyway, visuals. This movie is absolutely gorgeous. The animation, the color design, the goddamn background art. No joke, the shot of the motorcycle at the beginning of the movie, I legitimately thought it might be a real motorcycle. I had to rewind the movie and stare at it for a few seconds before realizing it was a painting. And the fact that this was just kind of thrown into the whole intro section and didn't even have any thematic significance whatsoever was just like, oh, this is the level of polish we're dealing with on some random shot that doesn't matter at all. Okay. I know I go on and on about visuals in every Ghibli movie and always call attention to the background art specifically, but the backgrounds are pretty, okay? The level of detail in the background art is just astonishing in Whisper of the Heart, especially in the interior of buildings, and especially in the interior of Shizuku's apartment. I absolutely love hyper-dense aesthetics and storytelling, like the kind that you can revisit over and over and find new things that you missed the first time through because there's just so much information to take in, and in such a short amount of time, too. It just makes each setting spring to life in a fraction of a second of it being on screen. There's just so much personality, oh my god! Like the whole layout of the antique shop and its location at the top of this super tall hill, and how Seiji and Shizuku go in between the antique shop and the building next to it to get down to the deck overlooking the city. Just what an incredibly creative, unique, and memorable set piece. Anyways, outside of specifically praising the backgrounds, the rest of the movie looked fantastic as well. Basically everything I said about Kiki's delivery service applies. This movie knocks it out of the park in pretty much every visual aspect. Also, voice acting is great and general sound design is great. Now then, moving on to the story, I will say that the first third or so of Whisper of the Heart wasn't like actively amazing me. I was a little confused about where the story was going since they had the whole love letter thing with Yuko and the whole trying to figure out who Amasawa is thing with Shizuku going on at the same time. But once the movie focuses in on the latter narrative, it really starts to pick up, and for the rest of the movie, I didn't even need to try to pay attention. Cause like some shows and movies kind of test your ability to pay attention. Like you can still enjoy them, but you have to put in a certain amount of mental effort yourself to connect with what the work is trying to tell you. Like if you're talking to someone in a second language that you're proficient in, you can still understand them, but it doesn't feel as natural as speaking in your native tongue. Whisper of the Heart is my native tongue. Watching it and finding it compelling was just effortless. It was so easy to pick up on and parse whatever information the movie threw at me, and by the end of the film, I felt like all these puzzle pieces that had been set up had just fallen into place perfectly. Honestly, it makes me feel like I would find the early part of this movie a lot more engaging upon rewatch, considering I might find more meaning in how the seeds of each element are planted, as well as just pick up on more of what the film had to say. Like, I've got this feeling that the automobiles that Shizuku and other characters often have to avoid in the super thin streets of the city have some sort of thematic meaning, but I can't figure out what it is. I don't know, maybe I'm just grasping at straws. Either way, it was another detail other than the background art which really made the setting feel real. Okay, character talk. It is scary how much I relate to Shizuku. Like, legitimately, I could make an entire video detailing the several uncanny similarities in each of our families, but that would obviously get into some pretty personal stuff. Still, I relate to basically everything about this girl, so there's plenty to discuss regardless. For one, obviously, I am also an amateur writer, just like Shizuku. I only really publicly post my commentary and analysis pieces, but I've dipped my toes into writing short stories as well as song lyrics, all of which are very cringy. But I'm also just an artist in general, and I have a sneaking suspicion that many other artists will be able to relate to this character as well. Okay, but that's mostly aesthetic similarities. What about the actual meat of her character arc? Well, just like Shizuku, I also spent a while questioning if I had a real passion for being an artist long term, or as the movie portrays it, having that crystal inside you that you just need to dig down to get to and polish off. I've also sacrificed my own well-being for the sake of a passion project that I cared a hell of a lot about, specifically staying up till 4 AM just to work on it. I compare my own abilities to others and feel frustration over how I'm not as skilled as them and how I feel like I should be better by now. Like, it's crazy to think of how applicable Shizuku's struggles are to myself and many other people in the modern age, considering this movie was released in 1995. It's so easy to find people on social media who are just far above your own skill level, and it's hard not to compare yourself to them and feel like you haven't accomplished nearly enough. I just get it. I get everything that this girl is about, and I understand exactly why she makes all the decisions that she makes. And so whenever she experiences a moment of development or learns a lesson of some kind, I was experiencing those moments of development and lesson learning along with her. It's exactly like what I talked about in the part of my Hilda video where I discussed the first 3 episodes of that show, but cranked up to 11. And just all the absolute wisdom bombs that Seiji's grandfather Shiro dropped on Shizuku felt like he was talking to me by extension because of how goddamn applicable his advice was to me. Obviously the whole thing about the crystal and the stone connected to me, but the gold medal has to go to the last scene they have together. I don't know how they did it, but the scene after Shiro reads Shizuku's novel and then he goes out onto the deck to talk to her about it and gives her advice and feedback, I was projecting myself so hard onto Shizuku to the point that I was literally thinking the same things that she was saying in real time and reacting to Shiro's responses exactly the way that she was reacting to them. Cause like, my in-depth analysis of Voltron Legendary Defender is literally Shizuku's Whisper of the Heart. It was my first big project that I put a ton of time and effort into, and while a good end product, has many flaws that I was and am unhappy with. But then Shiro said exactly what I and Shizuku needed to hear, and that was the truth. It does have its flaws, it is rough around the edges, it is unfinished, just like Seiji's violin. And it immediately clicks for Shizuku and myself. It's okay to not be perfect, and you shouldn't expect perfection on the first try. Everyone starts off not being as skilled as they currently seem. This movie truly gave me closure that I needed but never got, and for that I am incredibly thankful. And the movie could have legitimately stopped there and just settled on that message, but it takes it that step further and shows what Shizuku decides to do with this wisdom, which is to continue to work hard in school and continue going to school, because she realizes that you can follow your passion and work to have a stable and traditionally successful life at the same time, and that this is probably the best path to fulfillment and happiness in the long term, which is literally a decision that I have personally made. And the dynamic between Shizuku and her family and how she wants to dedicate everything to her writing and how they are understandably concerned and would rather her focus on school, it was just handled so perfectly. I especially love how the dad is portrayed as this kinda distant figure who supports the family but doesn't have much time or energy to actually spend with them. And then how that impression gets flipped on its head when he turns out to be the one who genuinely listens to and considers what Shizuku is saying about working on something more important than school was just entirely captivating. I'm sure I'm not the first person to consider this, but I highly suspect that Shizuku's dad was an aspiring artist himself, and like may have chosen to dedicate his life entirely to this stable, traditionally successful career path, and so he understands what Shizuku is going through and wants to make sure that she takes the path in life that will make her most happy. Just all the character interactions feel so genuine, as if they're being had by two real people with fully fleshed out personalities and lives, even if we only see one part of those lives. Like the romance between Shizuku and Seiji was just so organic, and how Shizuku is initially apprehensive, but they learn more about one another and realize all these things that they have in common. The little jabs that they take at one another suddenly feel like playful teasing between friends. It's adorable. But like, it's also just cheesy enough to be the kind of romance that would be had between two 14-year-olds. Though I will say that even though I know that couples tend to get together and get married much younger in Japan, I did still find it a little corny how the movie ends with Seiji asking Shizuku to marry him. Like, geez, you guys haven't even been on an official date and you're already planning to get married. And this is like the ending, so as far as the audience is concerned, they literally did just get engaged. Honestly, that and the beginning of the movie being not as good as the rest of it are the only quote-unquote flaws I can think of with this movie, and like I said, I suspect that on rewatch they won't be quite as noticeable. Not to badmouth any of the past few Ghibli movies I've watched, but I will say that they did make me wonder if I might have set my expectations for this studio a little too high. However, Whisper of the Heart just fully delivers and lives up to Ghibli's reputation. It has edged out Kiki's Delivery Service as my favorite of their films so far, and I would give this movie a solid 9 out of 10. But with that said, I'd love to hear what you guys thought about this movie down in the comments, assuming you're following along watching Ghibli's library with me or had already seen this film. And in the next installment of Watching Every Ghibli Movie, I will be watching Mononoke Hime, or Princess Mononoke. Anyways, with that said, thanks for watching, have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next one.